Hey everyone, it's Steve. My friend and colleague, Sharon, died last week. He was on this podcast almost exactly 5 years ago, and I wanted to repost our conversation. I remember being in New York for work and Tomer leaving the Google office and walking down the street to meet me at my then favorite donut shop in the city. In my experience, it's unusual for someone who spends their day in an office to actually leave their office versus just having me come over there. But I got to have a visit and a donut. Tomer was working on his book, It's Our Research, and he was describing the lifestyle of being an author, holding a full-time job with a family, and how he was writing on the bus during his commute every day. I was impressed with that amount of commitment and focus. I've written a few books, and I couldn't imagine doing any of it on a bus. Later on, Tomer asked me for feedback on the outline for his next book, Validating Product Ideas. I personally hate writing outlines, although it's pretty necessary for getting a book contract, let alone having a work plan to write the book. But understanding how it's all going to fit together is part of the messy journey of actually writing the book. But Tomer had this incredible outline. It was several levels deep, so there'd be a chapter heading and a section heading and a subsection heading and maybe even a level below that. And the text in each of the headings made the points somehow. This was just an outline. It was just headings. But going through this document, I could see the whole book in there. Thinking as an author, it was both intimidating and empowering. It made it look like the book was already written. It just needed the words to flesh it out. But it was basically, in air quotes, done. There was obviously a ton of work that had already gone into thinking it through at that level, and no doubt a huge amount of work left to be done to properly write it. But as a glimpse into how someone else might think through and structure the amount of content that a cutting-edge book needed to put across, I thought this was amazing. I've talked with other authors and prospective authors about Tomer's example over the years, and it's not to say that everyone should be able to write like this or even think like this, but understanding how different people go about their writing is instructive. I've contrasted my own messier process against Tomer's, or at least how I idealized it based on this artifact, and I've hoped that this helps other people feel confident in their book writing approaches. I even told Tomer about my reaction to this outline the last time we spoke, and I'm sure I mentioned it to him many times over the years. More recently, Tomer wrote me a lovely testimonial for the second edition of Interviewing Users, and is printed on the back cover. Tomer's death is a terrible loss for his family and friends, and also for our profession. He leaves behind a body of work, much of it public, such as his videos and talks and books, as well as the people he has influenced and guided directly or indirectly. In this episode from 2019, Tomer talks about leading research, of course, but he also shares some of his own background. Here's that episode as it originally came out.
Dollars to Donuts with your host, Steve Portugal.
Greetings, humans. Thanks for listening to Dollars to Donuts, the podcast where I talk to people who lead user research in their organization. Over the past while, I've been putting together a household emergency kit. It's primarily a shopping exercise, and I've ordered a hand crank and solar-powered radio, a replacement for matches, latex gloves, bandages, and air filter masks, which we made use of during a period of dangerously poor air quality recently. The last step was getting some food that will last. Cans of soup and stew, crackers, single-serve breakfast cereals. There's something satisfying about acquiring a bunch of stuff and storing it away, somewhat organized. And that led to a stray thought that I noticed. Oh, I can't wait to use all this great stuff. And then I realized how crazy that sounded. I don't want to use it. I don't want there to be some emergency that is bad enough that I'm drinking the emergency water stored in the garage and eating canned stew also stored in the garage. I mean, yes, we'll eat or donate the food before it expires and replace it, but this has overall been a whole set of preparations that I hope I'll not use, which leaves me with the hope for no shopping gratification, which is kind of a confusing way to feel. But it did remind me of the recent workshop I led with researchers in Sydney, Australia. We looked at a lot of the user research war stories I've been collecting, like those published in Doorbells, Danger, and Dead Batteries, and we pulled out lessons and best practices. There was, as there always is, a lot of discussion about safety and preparation. It seemed to me that people who worked in organizations with established safety cultures already had a strong baseline of safety procedures for user research and fieldwork, like, for example, texting a contact before and after a session, not going out alone, and so on. Their work cultures were strong on processes, especially for safety. So thinking about this for research was obvious. But not everyone works in that kind of environment, and plenty of researchers work for themselves without that corporate structure to support them in creating best practices for safety. Anyway, it led to a lot of discussion beyond just safety about running through possibilities ahead of time so that when any situation comes up, it's not a surprise and there's at least a starting point already established about how to respond. I think this is a great idea, but I think we have to acknowledge the limitations. You can't plan for every possible situation. There are always going to be things that come up that you probably haven't ever considered. I think that some planning for the unexpected will help you to adapt in the moment to surprises, but that's different from the false comfort of assuming you have every contingency planned for. I hope I never have to make use of our large cache of sterile latex gloves, but maybe just having acquired them, I'm in a slightly better situation for some other unexpected situation. You can help me continue to produce this podcast for you. I run my own small business, and you can hire me. I lead in-depth user research that helps drive product and strategy decisions, that helps drive internal change. I provide guidance to teams while they are learning about their customers, and I deliver training that teaches people how to be better at user research and analysis. You can buy either of my 2 books, The Classic Interviewing Users and Doorbells, Danger, and Dead Batteries, a book of stories from other researchers about the kinds of things that happen when they go out into the field. You can also review this podcast on iTunes and review the books on Amazon. With your support, I can keep doing this podcast for you. All right, time for my interview with Tomer. Tomer Sharon is the head of user research and metrics at Goldman Sachs. He's worked at Google and WeWork and has written 2 books, It's Our Research and Validating Product Ideas Through Lean User Research. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. It's great to have you here, virtually here in audio space that we're all sharing. Yeah, why don't you start off with just do a little introduction. Who are you? Where do you work? What are you doing?
Okay, thank you for having me first. My name is Tomer Sharon. I am currently head of user research and metrics at Goldman Sachs. I do have a second day job. I'm also heading a design group for a product called PWM, Private Wealth Management. Yeah, this is where I'm at in the past, almost a year.
All right. So what is Goldman Sachs?
Goldman Sachs is, I would say, an investment bank, probably one of the more important banks in the world. Big corporate, definitely not one you would associate with design and research, at least not that type of research, but they're changing and they're celebrating 150 years this year. And they're moving towards what's called outside digital transformation. And that includes learning more from their audiences and investing a lot more in design.
What's the relationship between the existence of your role and this larger shift that's going on?
I think there's a strong relationship. They have been realizing that they can't just be living in their own box, and they have to open up and try and understand audiences that they're engaged with already and new audiences. So I'll give an example. Goldman has a commercial bank. It's called Marcus. It's been around for a couple of years, but still these are consumers that Goldman is now trying to attract. So it's definitely not the kind of typical audience that they're used to. So they understand that they need to open up, learn from them, and design for them and with them. And that is a shift that has been happening in the past few years. And my role, I didn't replace anyone. I'm the first one, is a part of that shift.
Is there any sort of one point or one incident or key moment, I guess, which sort of marks that transition in a company like Goldman to say, yeah, we've been doing it this way, we need to do it this way?
I think it happened I don't know if there's one event, but I think it happened in the past maybe 2 years. The user experience team there was very small. And then suddenly they decided that it's time to invest more in that. And from 0, it went to, I don't know, several dozens, many dozens within a year. And the more do their work, show their work, share their work, and their work is very successful, the more teams and leaders talk about that. And then it's like a cycle that feeds itself, and then it grows and grows. So that's been happening a lot in the past few years.
And do you have a perspective on, because this awareness that you're describing at Goldman seems to align with what I've heard and observed in financial services in general.
Okay.
That it's an industry that maybe wasn't seen as paying attention to consumers, users, design, and over the past number of years.
Yeah. I will admit this is my first financial services job, so I'm not really familiar with that world other than Goldman. But so I hear. So I don't really know from first experience.
But I'm inferring, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm inferring that also is not a conversation that you're having inside Goldman.
No, it's very, I would say, kind of practical and tactical. We're not talking about the concept of having me and people like me there. We're just, focusing on doing the work that we know how to do. We've been doing for many years, and just bringing that insight and understanding of that world to an organization that wasn't aware of that previously.
That world is the processes and tools of learning about people?
Yeah, I would say process, tools, people. They're used to hiring different people. I saw that in Google at the time, and I saw that at WeWork at the time, where even formally you don't have in the HR systems, you don't have names for roles for what we do, for who we are. So I can't remember the names, but we were engineers or UI engineers or things like that until you get recognized. And I experienced that at Google, and then you do have a job family for design and for research and so on.
So at Goldman, you're trying to then that's part of the growth.
I'm not. We're too, especially in research, we're too few people to start having a job family in the HR systems. But we'll get there. I think what I'm trying to do is first a lot of evangelism, a lot of conversations with people to plant seeds in their minds that they might need somebody like that they might engage in a project, a one-off project, and learn more about it. And with several groups and divisions, it works already. So we have people there, and they start doing their work.
It's interesting that you're sort of highlighting evangelism versus conducting research.
Right. Sometimes it's integrated.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's I'm asking people to some kind of a leap of faith, and then we do the research, and then the work talks for itself. I don't need to evangelize anymore. They get it. They understand. They want more of it, and from there, the doors are open. I prefer it this way. Even in the past, I prefer to do the work, show, rather than wave my hands and talk about it. I found it to always be more meaningful to people and more persuading.
I've heard this. I don't know if this is what's playing out for you in these situations, but that, you help someone take a leap of faith. You do this work. The results speak for themselves for them. Do those results, or how can you help those results spread elsewhere in the organization? I
use that example when I talk with others.
Yeah.
And I invite people to connect. Same company, you can hear from them, can meet them. I sometimes facilitate those meetings, and then they hear from others. I know it will take time. It's not something that happens, over a day or a week or a month, sometimes a year. But these conversations happen, whether I'm aware of them or not, whether I facilitate them or not. And I'm confident that the more work we do, the more people we'll have and will be more impactful.
And how does that work across different, I don't know if they're called business units, but Goldman, as you said, sort of speaks to different kinds of users, different kinds of customers with its products and services.
So as soon as we have a researcher joining the group, we assign them to let's call it a business unit or a product team. And then they're theirs 100% of the time. I only support them with infrastructure, career growth, and things like that. And then they do their work with the team. I do a lot of legwork before that happens to make sure that they have a team that wants them, that needs them, and that knows what to expect. So it's not the first time that they hear about that research thing with the appearance of the person. Yeah, so that's how I intend to continue doing, rather than hire to work in an agency model, have a pool of people that come and go based on projects.
Okay, so just to reiterate, you talk about help someone to take a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm putting those words. I'm
No.
maybe changing your words a little bit, and a next step from that is to hire someone and put them in that team.
Yeah.
And then they do the work, and then the work, as you said, the work speaks for itself. But it's
Yeah.
the work that you've staffed someone into that team.
Yeah, I'll just add to that in many cases, it's not really a leap of faith because there are people who are I call myself an outsider, who didn't grow up in Goldman, that know about this field, know about research, know about people like us. So they're very open to having them. So that's easy, much easier.
So you said you're not looking to do an agency model.
No.
From your face, I think there's a point of view.
Yes, definitely.
What's the point of view behind
The point
that?
of view is that I want people to feel they belong. Researchers feel they belong to a team, and I feel that if I just send them off to projects, short-term projects, they can't grow with the team. They can't have any history with the product. They're not familiar. They're really like consultants that come and go. I want them to feel a part of the team, understand all the history, sit with them. I don't look for them to sit next to me. I want them to sit with their teams, and then kind of be a part of that team, and then be more impactful. I strongly believe that this is the way to go.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen before, kind of with my own eyes, both not WeWork, because we didn't do that at WeWork, but definitely at Google, where we experienced at some point a decentralization. So there was one UX group, and then we're decentralized into the different business units. Not much has changed because people were assigned to teams already, but it just felt like the right thing to do, to have people sit with their teams, work with the same team, the same product for long periods of time.
So what implications, if any, does that have for what kind of skill set someone that you're hiring needs to have?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I'm looking for more experienced people, more senior people. There will be a time where we will hire more junior people. That's not the time when we're just starting. And I had the same thing at WeWork when we were building a group from scratch. You need experienced people. So I'm looking for people who are eager and passionate about building something from scratch, taking a team that maybe doesn't know anything about user research, and try and kind of build that relationship and build those results. You talked about that earlier with that team, and grow with them, grow the practice with them, and maybe if it's extremely successful, grow a team there at some point.
There's always a thing with questions and answers where at least for me, I ask a question, I have an idea of what answer I'm going to get.
Okay.
And it's interesting when the answer is different. I know it doesn't always cleave this way, but there's sort of the soft skills and hard skills thing.
Yeah.
I imagined I was going to get a hard skills answer because I was thinking about some of the pragmatic constraints of this. But your answer emphasized more, I think, softer skills, growth, advocacy, leadership from a research point of view.
I think it kind of almost goes without saying that once you're, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but once you're, I always like to, I tell that to my people when we hire, we look for resumes that scream researcher. So if your resume screams researcher, then that's covered. I'm more interested in the soft skills.
Yeah. Can I push on that just a little bit more?
Sure.
I mean, I think, my bias here, or the perspective I come from is the consultants, right? So I come in and out. So I know what the limitations of that are. And so just from where I sit, I see the challenges of what you're describing, because, there's a life cycle of what a team is developing. It's probably a smarter way to say that, but something's being built and it goes through stages over weeks, months, years. And so the research needs change.
Right.
And so the way the researcher has to respond to that or lead that or support that changes.
Right.
So that's kind of that's I'm just revealing what I was probing on here, what I thought the answer was going to be. When you say screams researcher in a resume, does that sort of imply that, the ability to, are you inferring from that resume the ability to support that team at all these different eras of its evolution?
Yeah, a resume that screams researcher is a resume that you see all the methods, you see the flexibility, and kind of not sticking to one method or one approach, doing that in multiple cultures, multiple companies, have a trajectory of growth.
Yeah.
So you're doing from kind of less meaningful things to more meaningful things, and so on. So yeah, that's, to me, screams researcher.
Got it.
Not, you look at the job titles and you ask yourself, why am I even reading this resume? And then you read a cover letter that says something along the lines of, I've always wanted to be. I think maybe at some point, but not now.
Yes, right. There is an archetype of a person, I think, that identifies strongly with researchers and sort of what they're about, but their experience doesn't match that.
And I'm smiling because I there's always an exception. And I remember one at WeWork where, and I was talking, speaking the same way. Only senior people. I'm not looking for more junior people. And then I hired 2 junior people because there's always an exception, because you see somebody who kind of makes me ignore everything I just said and hire them. So
what's an example of something that overrides that?
I don't even know how to explain it. It's just sometimes it's a spark in the eyes that you see immediately with people, and you see that they are going to be like a sponge, if that's a good metaphor. And you just know it's going to work.
Right. You said passion early on, right? And I think, I don't know, evidence of passion is past performance, but that's not the only evidence of passion if you're seeing that with people that you're meeting.
Right. Although in most cases, I'm very reluctant to hire based on passion if you don't have experience.
Yeah.
Because you can have a lot of passion and motivation, but you know nothing. And that it doesn't mean you're going to be bad, but it means a lot of people are going to need to support you. So I think my approach is that I'll try and do 0 to very little of that, because we're just starting. We're just a few people. We don't really have the time that we need to support our teams. We don't have the time to support another person. Not now. When we grow, that's definitely. There's, if we were, 10, 20 senior people on the team, I would say we have to have more junior people, because we can't have a team of only senior people.
Right.
But right now, we're not even close to that. So.
Can you say the size that you are now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we are 4, a couple of weeks will be 5. So worldwide, both here in New York and in London.
And is there a roadmap for number of people, to get to that 10 or 20?
Yeah, I don't want to mention numbers, but I think we're on a path of growth, definitely. Okay.
Yeah. So you talk about sort of the time commitment required to support people at different levels.
Yeah.
But I want to go back and clarify one thing. You sort of, as almost an aside, you said that you don't want to do the agency model. You want people with these teams, but you're trying to provide infrastructure.
Yes.
And then you used a phrase like career growth.
Yeah.
So given the size that you're at now, like acknowledging that there's bandwidth, challenges here. But so what does infrastructure look like? What does career growth look like now?
Infrastructure. So that's easy. So there's a lot of, when I look around me, there's a lot of motivation to do research, but there are needs in terms of, and gaps in terms of tools, knowledge, guidance, process. So research was happening before there were researchers, but it was very based on sporadic motivation from different people who are really trying to do the best they could do. So we need to support them with, services that are out there, industry standard services. So we need to sign agreements and get those licenses, onboard different vendors.
What's an example?
User testing, user Zoom. These would be 2, but there are more. And we are kind of creating process for, what happens if you want to do research, but you don't have a researcher, and you probably won't have a researcher in the next few years. But you still, you acknowledge the fact that you need research now. So we have we've established some kind of a way to ask for that, and then sign up for office hours or something like that, and then get some help from us. We will advise you and help you kind of get going without a researcher. We're started working with OKRs. So if that's to me, that's a part of kind of infrastructure, or the cool kids now call it research ops. So research ops.
Right. So explain what OKRs are, and explain what research ops is.
OKRs, objectives and key results. It's a goal setting approach. There are many. This is just the one that I'm familiar with, and that's just a way to set goals and see how you're doing. So we do that as a research group as well. Research ops, I would take the easy route and say this is everything that helps research happen without the actual research.
So are the OKRs an example of research ops? That's what you were saying?
So the tools that I mentioned,
Yep.
the OKRs, hiring, knowledge management.
All of the infrastructure.
Yes.
Is
If somebody wants to do, I don't know, whatever, a usability test, and they don't know how. So you want them to have the tool. We want them to have a knowledge base that they can access and see, okay, what do I need to do to run a usability test? And we want them to have guidance and support from a person, from a researcher who knows what they're doing. And I would say all of that is research ops. For researchers, a big part of research ops is participant recruitment. So finding people to learn from. That's a big part. And something that I'm truly passionate about is kind of insight repository. So building some kind of a repository that we can pull from later on. I would add to that any infrastructure involving measuring the user experience. So building that, I would also kind of include that under research ops.
So you said you're passionate about Insight Repository.
Yeah.
I have to actually ask a question.
What do you want to know?
Yeah. What are you trying to get to at Goldman? What are you working towards with that?
It's the same as everywhere. I mean, for many years, I realized I was kind of bothered by how wasteful research is. That even I felt that I'm kind of quote unquote learning the same things over and over again. I know that other people did research in the same company, did research that I'm about to do. And even if I get their insights, I'm going to do that again. And I know it's really, really messy and hard to retain all the knowledge that you gather from research. So I was, the second I had an opportunity to do something about it, I did. That was at WeWork. And we built a system that we called Polaris for that, to solve these problems. We identified it's going to sound funny, but we identified that the main problem, the main root cause for these problems is the research report. That was what I called back then the atomic unit of a research insight. And we changed that unit into, well, that's why the metaphor breaks, a smaller atom that we call a nugget, a research nugget. And that's what we stored in this repository. So a nugget was a combination of an observation, evidence, and tags.
What was the last one? I'm sorry.
Tags. And then due to these tags, you can then search through this database and find answers to questions that you didn't design studies around. So it happened many times at WeWork where people came to us and said, what do we know about or can we do a study about blah, blah? And we said, let's try Polaris first. And we realized that we have all the answers without even needing to do more research. This will only happen, you have to change your ways a little bit, not just work with a system like that. This will only happen if you do kind of continuous research, continuous and open-ended research. Back then at WeWork, we did exit interviews. So every WeWork member customer that decided to leave, we pinged them and talked with them, interviewed them, and asked them kind of very open-ended questions such as, why are you leaving? What worked well at WeWork? What didn't work so well? If you had 15 minutes with the CEO, what would you tell him? Things like that. And then that allowed us to have answers to many, many questions because these research participants, these exiting members, decided what they wanted to talk about. If they wanted to talk about, I don't know, whatever, the price that was too high for them or the coffee that was too great for them to leave to another place or whatever it is that they chose, went into the system, and then we could pull it out later on and then see, okay, we heard, and combining that with a user experience measurement system would lead you to a situation where you can say, okay, I saw that satisfaction with coffee in our WeWork buildings in the Netherlands has gone down in the past month. Here's a playlist of 3 Dutch members bitch about coffee from the past month. And then you have the what happened, the numbers. You have the why it happened from these videos. And if you kind of quote unquote serve that to the person that buys or decides how to brew coffee in the Netherlands, then it's halfway through to the solution. So we imagine something like that at Goldman as well.
So it only works, you said, if you have kind of ongoing
Yeah.
open-ended
Have to,
research.
yeah.
Why is that?
Because if you always, so the other type of research, I had to give it a name. So I would call it dedicated research. Dedicated research is research that you do and you know what research questions you have beforehand, and you answer those questions. And then you can create nuggets and it's all good. But then you'll only have answers to those questions. When you do open-ended, you have answers to questions you never imagined that you might have or may have in the future.
What if my research question is, what are the highs and lows of a WeWork member? Is that...
So if you do that once, you'll get a snapshot of that point in time.
Okay.
But if you do that continuously, kind of all the time, and at WeWork, we at some point interviewed all the UX team members, did that on a kind of regular frequency, then you have thousands and thousands of data points that you can pull
Okay, so
from.
there's a sort of a scale here.
Yeah.
Scope or scale, I don't even know which one it is, but there's an amount of data that covers a breadth of topics, and that is also refreshed.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's, I would hate if anyone asked me this question, but I'm going to ask you, what's an insight? Because you were kind of saying a nugget is this sort of stuff, but you brought up insight. So what's an insight?
Yeah, I actually have a definition for that. I'm thinking about that these days. An insight to me is a deep understanding of a situation. I'm trying to think of an example. I'll go to WeWork again. So imagine a researcher that walks in a WeWork building, kind of looking around, and then sees WeWork has kind of shared open spaces, but also private offices. So let's say they notice in private offices that a lot of them have printers that they brought in. And that looks odd because WeWork offers printing. So we have printers and we offer that as a part of your WeWork membership. And if you kind of go over, you pay for more. It's a nice stream of revenue for WeWork. And they counted, let's say they counted and saw that half of the private offices brought in their own printers. They go to a second building and a third building and they count and they see the same. Half of the members that have private offices brought in their own printer. So let's say they stop here, go back to the office and add an insight nugget, whatever we call it, to the system saying half of WeWork members in those buildings brought in their own printers. That to me is not a deep understanding of the situation. That's not enough. It's very interesting. It may be indicative of something that's going on that we're not aware of, but that's not enough. We have to understand why. So I would encourage that researcher to knock on the doors and ask, why? And then we may hear things like, oh, you have a 15-page manual on how to install printers, and that's I'm not going to waste my time on that. Or you have to log in each time you go to a printer, and that's taking more time, and so on and so forth. We do steal your paper, so we enjoy that. So that's what I mean by deeper understanding. So we can better understand the situation, know to answer why that is happening, have some evidence, and then I would say that's an insight. That's a deep understanding of a situation. And to me, the system that we built can enforce that. So you cannot submit nuggets or insights without that why part. Just facts are not enough. We don't need facts. We need facts plus why they are what they are.
Right. There's a behavior. What's the reason for that behavior?
Yeah.
And I struggle when I hear people talk about insights because sometimes they talk about why a single person is doing something as opposed to sort of why users of a system are experiencing something. Like in your scenario, you knock on somebody's door and say, what's up with your own printer? They say, oh yeah, it's too hard to install.
Yeah.
And you come back and say, like, there's a difference between we understand why this person was doing it and then sort of the generalized conclusion. I don't know. I'm putting my own language into your framework. It's probably not working.
Right.
But
what we would do with Polaris is gather those individual insights. So each one would be a nugget.
Yeah.
And then if you have 100 of these, the only difference would be the video, the person in front of the camera explaining why they brought in a printer or whatever it is. And then you can create a playlist and show it to IT or whoever decided that we're going to go with this system for printing and have them decide what they're going to do about it.
Okay, so let me push on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because when you talk to, let's just say 5 people or something about this behavior, bringing in their own printers, people are going to give related but sort of seemingly individualized explanations. And there's an act of interpretation, analysis, and synthesis, words that we often use, to sort of say, well, let's look at all of those. Like, what's the overarching reason? Talk about a deep understanding. And it's not that we lose track of the fact that the installation manuals is messy. There's not enough plugs. There's a lot of sort of reasons, but the larger issue is something like complexity or not seen as adding to my business or something. There's a higher order thing. To me, that's what the insight is. So I think you're talking about doing that. I'm just, the words are slippery here when we're talking about insights and nuggets and sort of explanations.
Nugget is more the kind of the technical way we called it, but I agree. And the way it happened in Polaris is through those playlists. So we encourage people, both in people who belong to the UX team and ones that are not, to collect these nuggets into playlists and then prove a point or do this analysis, get to an insight, and share it. So it depends on what you find and what you collect there. But let's say you search for printers and then you get 73 results. You sift through them and you see that, 15 are, not really related to what you're trying to communicate here. The rest is too many. So you'll pick maybe 7 that are, the videos are really good, like good participants, quote unquote, good participants that, eloquently explain the point. And then you can add your analysis in writing and describe that higher insight or deeper insight. Yeah.
So Polaris kind of sets you up to make that interpretation.
Yeah.
It gives you some structure, some way to quickly.
Yes.
Does Polaris, does Polaris capture that thing that it facilitates you to make?
What do you mean?
So create this playlist, you watch the playlist, and you come up with sort of a new articulation. The biggest issue around printers for us is that we're doing this and they are thinking that. Right? That's a new piece of knowledge that's created by reviewing what Polaris gives you.
Yeah. Polaris was not smart. It's just a tool. It's just it would do whatever, it allows you to do whatever you want to do with it. So it allows you to add text to do that.
Yeah.
So if that's a yes, then yeah, it allowed you to do that. But Polaris in its kind of essence is very simple.
Yeah.
Just a tool that facilitates the storage of those nuggets.
Yeah.
And creation of those playlists from these.
Yeah. Oh, so that really helps me understand sort of what you're aiming at when you talk about Insight Repository. Yeah. It's, to me, something that you can re-query to come up with new conclusions.
Exactly.
As opposed to sort of, here's all the things that we've concluded.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow. Here's the gif of the mind blowing up a little bit.
Yeah. You want more? I mean,
if you have more, yes.
I mean, these are now it's just ideas, and that's not something I'm kind of working towards in Goldman. But I'm thinking. So imagine every company that should have a Polaris has it. That's also waste. Because then every company has its own repository, and then I'm sure there's a lot of overlap. So maybe in the future there should be a kind of open
panopticon
an open Polaris or whatever we call it.
Yeah.
That anybody can contribute to and anybody can pull from. I'm not doing anything about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, so this is like a third-hand quote that I'm sure I'm misquoting, but a friend of mine told me this, and he was quoting the head of knowledge management at NASA.
Okay.
And this guy says, the best knowledge management tool is lunch.
I can see I can see why that was said, yet I wholeheartedly reject the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not scalable. That's not, what if I went to the bathroom when that happened? What if I started working in NASA a day after that important insight was shared? I can understand the kind of anecdotal part of it, how it's useful. But to me, there has to be something, I don't know what to call it, more solid.
Yeah. I mean, analogously, you started off our conversation by describing the lunching that you're doing at Goldman. I mean, connecting people, meeting people. That's different, I think, than transmitting nuggets. Yeah. But you are using sort of lunch, and I mean very vaguely lunch, time with people, talking to them.
Yeah.
As a way to, I don't know, as a way to do what? What's the difference between sort of the NASA lunch thing and what you're doing with sort of socializing and connecting people?
I think what I'm trying to do is kind of socialize a discipline.
Yeah.
And if I understand it correctly, the NASA lunch is to socialize an insight, maybe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think we're there yet in terms of socializing insights.
And who knows what the context of that quote, which has been quoted, which I'm requoting, it might be exactly coherent with what you're talking about.
Maybe.
I want to loop back to something you talked about as part of this infrastructure. You said there's groups that don't have a researcher and that may never have a researcher.
Right.
And so what are sort of tools, knowledge base that can help them do things? And I feel like there's a thing in our field about like who does research.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not really sure what the label for that is, but
job security.
Yeah, is that what it is?
Should we let them do research?
Right.
Yeah, it makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Of course, we should let them, as if we're the authority. But yeah, of course. I mean, why would anyone not be allowed to do research because they didn't go to school? I don't think so. If somebody wants to do it, that's to me that's huge. So we should give them everything we can to let them do it. Are they going to be doing a bad job? Maybe. But to me, bad research is better than no research. It's a first step. And if we're good about the tools, socializing what we do, socializing best practices, things will get better. Yeah, they'll probably be crap at it in the first few times, maybe the first 20 times, but they really want to. They have this passion, and why kill it by saying that it's our job or something like that? So yes, I'm all for, quote unquote, letting them do research, definitely.
I mean, I think you highlighted exactly. So I think job security is a fear, but I think bad research is also a fear, as you said.
I'm okay with that.
And you said bad research is better than no research.
To me, 100%. Yes.
I like how definitive you are. I think that's because that's a hot topic. I think I've heard people go back and forth on it.
I know. I heard that too. I'm definitely on that side.
But I also will say that you're describing ways to limit or mitigate bad research. I think
help make it better.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, first they need to know about it. What happens there are so many people who develop, let's say, software at Goldman. They're not even aware of our existence. It's not that they think about it and say, no, I'm not going to do it. They don't even know that this is happening, that we are there. So I think there's a long way to go. We need to kind of be more popular, be more known, and then provide all the tools, help, guidance, knowledge that we can, knowing that we can't support everybody. It's not going to happen. Happened even at Google that had, at the time, hundreds, today probably a lot more researchers. There are teams that built stuff. Why not allow them to do research? Should help them.
I mean, you made the comment that research was happening before there were researchers. Yeah. I mean, in the history of the world, that's also true, right?
True.
Okay.
We can't stop that or control that.
And so maybe just a slight shift, we're sort of talking about who's allowed to do what, or what are researchers and what do we do? You mentioned early on that you also have taken on an additional role. Yeah. You want to just give us some context to that, and what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I also lead a design group for a product. Private wealth management allows very rich people to manage their money. It's a part of a service that Goldman offers, and the digital aspect of it is not the primary aspect of it. It's just has a kind of supporting role. It's mostly based on a relationship between an advisor, a Goldman Sachs advisor, and a client. And there's the usual suspects. There's a website, apps, and so on. So I'm now leading a group of people that design that. And I mean design with the expanded way we define it. So it's not just designers, it's also researchers and data people and a writer and prototyping and so on.
Are there differences between managing researchers? You talked before about people coming in with resumes that scream researchers versus all the different kinds of functions you're working with on that team.
Honestly, no, I don't think so. I would be the first to admit it. I'm not personally not the best designer, not in the world definitely, and not that I could be. But I think there are things that are similar no matter what kind of group you're you're leading. It's good that you know something about what the group is doing, but I think it's mostly about kind of empowering the right people, giving them what they need, releasing them of things that are just stupid, that they don't need to do, they don't need to be involved in, and focusing them on what they are passionate about. This doesn't, have any direct relationship with design or research or
There's an email list that I think you and I are both on that's about design and user research. And there was a thread, or maybe people were having a conference call. I can't even remember how it manifested, but the topic was researchers managing designers.
Okay.
This sort of, which seems like it's a newer thing, that if you look historically, like research was sort of the sort of accessory or adjacency to design. And so design teams kind of manage researchers.
Yes.
But as research has grown, there's other people in the situation like yours where their label for themselves would lean more towards researcher, but they're managing designers. So it's interesting that you sort of don't see a difference, because I feel like the thrust of this group needing to talk was, hey, there's something different here, and so how are we going to deal with it?
I know I have kind of my internal bias towards research, so I'm probably more kind of attentive to mostly when that is not happening, maybe, than a person who would be a designer that manages designers. But I'm just guessing. I don't know. I know that I'm definitely I care about research, and I notice and say something when it doesn't happen. So I don't know. I would have to be a designer to know if that's different.
I'm thinking I might switch gears entirely here.
Go for it.
I'd love to just go way back, like as far back as you want to go.
Okay.
And maybe, give the story of things you did in your life to kind of get here, whether those are work or school or other things. Like that
got me here?
Yeah. What's your sort of background or your narrative arc, if you will?
So I'll tell you something from a long time ago that probably really was the tipping point that I wasn't even aware of, that was the tipping point at the time. So, it's not a secret. I'm originally from Israel, and I relocated almost 12 years ago. And while in Israel, I served in the army. And I signed for kind of career in the army. So the whole shebang, to be a kind of career officer for the long term. But then when I was, 24, I was a paraglider, and I took a course, and I got injured badly, and I was out of the army for a year. I was at home kind of recovering, and that was a bad thing. Bad injury, but that opened my eyes. And during that year, I came back to the army and said, I want to cancel the whole thing. I don't want to stay. I want out. I will do my next job, because we planned for one more job, but that's it. I'm out. And that's what happened. And I think without that accident, I would I'd probably be retired by now, but I would be a career officer and not what I am today. And kind of looking back, I'm happy that that's what happened. That was kind of, I would say that's the biggest thing that affected what I'm doing today.
And so opening your eyes was realizing that you didn't want to go on the path that you were on. Yeah. Was there any hints for you of what path you did want to pursue?
I knew it was creative. I was on a wheelchair for 4 months, and then crutches, and then learned how to walk again. And I kind of made my way once I was able to kind of get up to a local artist that gave kind of very open-ended lessons in his basement, like a couple of blocks from my house at the time. And so I started painting and kind of tried all kind of ways to paint. And I didn't know to say that I will be an artist. And honestly, I wasn't really good at it. But I knew it would be something creative. So I didn't know exactly what.
And if you look at your work today, does it match that?
Not 100% overlap, but I feel some of it is, yeah.
I mean, I have wrestled mostly privately with just the idea, is research a creative field, or are we creative?
Some of it is.
I found myself in a collaboration with people that I think more traditionally fit that job description, and I kind of had my hair blown back just on sort of the speed of the speed and breadth of making stuff. It was definitely intimidating, and I had to think, well,
So I would call myself a researcher, but still, I was heavily involved in shaping Polaris. That's a product. It's not research work. I'm now involved in creating a system that I also lead a small team of engineers that build a system to measure the user experience. So that is definitely more creative than maybe research, but some parts of kind of pure research are creative. Deciding to me, probably the biggest one is translating one or a set of questions that a team has into, okay, what are we going to do to get answers? It's not always, if it was that easy to come up with an answer to that, then anybody would do that well. But that's not the case. A lot of people are having a lot of trouble with that part. So I think that's a creative part. You're not going to see a beautiful painting coming out of that, but it is creative.
I think for me, the creating the new story out of a bunch of experiences or nuggets or whatever sort of you're pulling from.
Realizing, getting to an insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you do after the art class? What did you end up doing?
I applied to what we call today probably a visual communication program. Got accepted to one of the best ones, if not the best ones in Israel at the time, and last minute decided that it's not for me. And then I studied copywriting. So I'm a certified copywriter. In Hebrew, though. And then I took my first job, or I worked for 3 years as, I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I did something that I knew how to do. And that was, I worked in a very small consultancy for military-oriented industries. So I did that I was a project manager. I did that for, I think, 3 years. And that was the time where I kind of learned all these things and kind of really set my mind that, anything army related is not for me. And then my first real job in that direction was, I was funny how names were at that time. I was an internet copywriter. We probably call today a content strategist for a website that I would compare it to Monster or Indeed or something like that today. And there I got exposed to probably at the time it was Jacob Nielsen and people in that area started reading more. I did some what we would call today product management work there. And then I asked them to switch to what we would call today a researcher. They said no. And I was like, okay. And I looked for a company who would take me. And there was one company that took me as it wasn't researcher. It was called usability something. And that's it. That's how it started. They were very brave, I should admit, because I didn't know much.
But they took you as a researcher. Yeah. So that was sort of your first time with the title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want more funny, even funnier story? The only person who actually knew what it was the CEO. He was the one who interviewed me. And then he hired me. And then a month later, he decided to leave. So the only person who really knew what I was doing left about a month in. So, but that went well. But yeah, that's how it started.
And what was the point at which you came to the U.S.?
So I had, I think, one more or a couple more jobs. And I realized very quickly that at the time, at least, there weren't enough or even at all opportunities to grow into even managing a group or a team of people who do that. I was always the only person in the company that did that. And I realized, or I got to the conclusion that the only place for me to work in a company that has a lot of people of my tribe would be here in the States. And I also realized the Army there is not like the Army here. I didn't have any academic degree. I also realized that I needed the right degree because these companies that I was thinking about would not even read my resume. My resume didn't scream researcher. So I went to school. I continued working and went to school, completed my bachelor's, and then applied to Bentley University here, and then moved. And as I was studying there, I during school there in Massachusetts, I contacted Google and things rolled from there.
We talked about WeWork a little bit.
Yep.
What was your role at Google, and maybe what was your role at WeWork?
Google, I was a user researcher, a senior user researcher, first in advertising. I'm pretty sure they changed all the names by now, but at the time it was DoubleClick for publishers. That was the product I was involved in. Ironically, I was the only researcher there in that group of hundreds of people. And after, I think, 2.5 years, I switched to transfer to search. And in search, I was first voice search, and then we called it at the time core search, so the bag of 10 blue links, and how they developed from that point what you see today as kind of all the visual aspects of the results and so on. So that started back then, vertical by vertical, TV, movies, music. I was doing a lot of research into search results for sports, know a lot more than I should about all kinds of sports, cricket and so on. That was.
And then what was the role you took at WeWork?
WeWork, I was head of user experience. So I started a group from scratch. And the goal there, and this is kind of following several conversations with the CEO and co-founder that hired me. At the time, again, I'm sure things have changed since, but at the time, WeWork had 3 big groups internally that kind of built or created the 3 aspects of the WeWork product. And they were called even digital, physical, and community. And Adam, the CEO, felt, and he was very right, that while each group is doing a great job, sometimes if you look for how things are from the perspective of the customer, the member, there are gaps between those groups that we're not even aware of. And the goal was to identify those gaps. To me, that translates to research. And then solve the problems there. I'm thinking of an example. Think about conference rooms. So conference rooms is something that WeWork offers. Members pay for it. So somebody physically designed the conference room. An architect decided on the size and location. An interior designer decided on the mood and what will be in the room. Somebody from IT picked an AV system for that room. Somebody in digital developed a system to book this room. Somebody in community designed a policy of how to use this room. And community team members in the buildings enforce this policy. Everything's good, everything's working well, but then situations happen such as, members come to a meeting, they book their room, and then another member is squatting the room and refusing to go out. Even if they walk in, they realize that I'm a startup. I booked a room for a meeting with a potential investor, and then I see a room that is designed as a music room with bean bags, and it's clear and no projector, clearly inappropriate for my meeting. Or that person who's squatting, I'm going to the community manager, but they are dealing with a leak of water from the ceiling on another member's head. So they're all very nice, but they can't solve my problem right now. So this is what I'm talking about when I said the gap between kind of those groups. So we're trying to identify those gaps, because in many cases WeWork didn't even know about this, and try and solve them. So
great.
That was the premise back then.
Is there any? You've written books. You give a lot of talks. What would you?
Less now. I should say.
But you have a good sort of history of creating material.
Yeah.
You've interviewed a lot of people.
Yeah.
What would people listening, what would you send them to buy, read, watch?
Well, our publisher would not be a publisher if he wouldn't be happy if I say that they should buy my book, yours too. And that would be, the name of the book is Validating Product Ideas Through Lean User Research. That's a book I would only mention that because my first book is for researchers. A lot of researchers do listen, right? So maybe I'll mention both. But the second book, the one I mentioned, it's kind of step-by-step guide into answering different research questions that people have. Each chapter is a research question, step-by-step on how to answer it through research that anybody can do quickly. The first book It's called It's Our Research. It's to solve a problem that at least at the time, I now have different thoughts about that, but at least at the time, a lot of researchers had, maybe today as well. And that is a problem that a lot of people don't want to do research because they feel they have the answers already or they have good intuition. And also once they agree to do research, in some cases, they don't want to act on it.
Act on
the research
what they've
results.
learned?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a book that is supposed to help with that problem. And I'm kind of having different thoughts now because my answer in that book was, and that's why I called it It's Our Research, make them feel that it's their research as much as you feel it's yours, and then they would want it, and then they would do something about it. That was my point. Today, I'm having kind of different thoughts about how to get to a point where research is wanted and acted on. And I will try it at some point. We just need to grow a little bit at Goldman. But my thoughts are, when you, and I posted something about that recently, when you plug your phone charger to the wall, do you really care how electricity gets there? What's happening in the power plant, why it's working, how is it efficient, is it not efficient, and so on. You don't really care. You want your phone charged. My thoughts about research is why wouldn't it be the same? People have questions. Research provides answers. Yes, a lot is going on to get to those answers. But if you have a question, why do we need to bother you with all the details? Let's just do the thing. Trust us to do the thing. We'll give you an answer to your question. I'm going to try that at some point. I'm thinking of it's not political, but building a wall between stakeholders and researchers. Mm-hmm. That wall could be Slack or something like that, through which stakeholders ask questions and researchers provide answers. If we have an answer immediately, if we have a system like Polaris or something like that, we can provide an answer. If we don't, we will just ask a few questions, follow-up questions, and then do the research and get the answer. Just thoughts. I haven't tried it yet.
Well, it makes me think of the research ops piece a little bit, where like building up participant recruitment infrastructure is an interesting one because, back in the old days where we had to, do everything ourselves, you're learning about your problem by figuring out how to recruit by recruiting. You also learn about your problem by dealing with your stakeholder and seeing what it's that art piece versus this kind of process infrastructure piece. And it's interesting to think about like what is lost and what is gained, or how is it changed when you create infrastructure that, like if you're a researcher and you're completely decoupled from participant recruiting, that may change how you deal with the people that you meet or how you deal with framing the problem.
Yeah.
And so for everything that we build up a process that's efficiency, that kind of is a query system, how does that change what we do and who's coming to this field? And these are not necessarily my own thoughts, but just things I'm hearing from people as well.
One other thing that I would send people to is a series of Medium posts that I published in the past year, maybe less, about measuring the user experience. A lot of people like to talk about metrics these days. I took the HEART framework from Google, and then we have a post per letter. So about happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success. And for each one, what it is, what's important to measure, why, how, mistakes, and what actions you can take from each one. So this is something that I'm interested in these days, measurements. And I'm kind of trying to figure out the H part, the happiness part specifically. There are a ton of challenges with that, how to measure satisfaction and happiness. And I'm also posting, kind of not tracking my own life, but paying more attention to when I'm exposed to requests to rate satisfaction and happiness. And I share them with people with my kind of thoughts about them.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Anything else that we should talk about in this conversation?
I said I am speaking kind of publicly a lot less, but I do that from time to time. I'll be speaking in 2 conferences, The Face of Finance in April, I think, in New York, and in London, User Research London in June in London.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to chat and sharing all the information and stories and everything. That's really,
Thank you.
Really appreciate
it. Thank you.
Thanks. And so concludes another episode of Dollars to Donuts. Follow the podcast on Twitter and subscribe to the podcast at portable.com/podcast or iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or any place you get your podcasts. Also online at portable.com/podcast is the transcript and links for this episode, and of course all the previous episodes. At Amazon and RosenfeldMedia.com, you can buy Tomer's books and my books. Our rocking theme music was written and performed by Bruce Todd.